Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game So we're going to doing series who's Nintendo is suing or screwing this week, and we got another weird update to the Palworld lawsuit, because it seems like Nintendo 100% knows they're behind the 8 ball when it comes to actually trying to win this patent case. So once again, they are trying to change the rules mid-lawsuit to make it seem like all of Palpair's defenses should not be allowed. It's going to be a really interesting one, but before we get too far involved, do me a huge favor down below, hit like and subscribe and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, I got a Patreon link down below as well. But let's get right into what Nintendo's trying to do right now. Palworld issued multiple defenses, including one of prior art. That's basically giving examples of games that did what Nintendo did before Palworld had even done it. Therefore, those patents should be invalidated because they are not novel, new, or unique. And how it basically works is you can't patent something that already exists. It has to be a new innovation. So in the patent stage, you could submit issues, or if there are prior art instances, you wouldn't actually get a patent for that content. That's what Nintendo is doing here. They're trying to say that if the prior art exists as a modification to an existing game, it should not be available for patent protection, which is absolutely one of the most insane arguments I've ever heard. It would basically say that if you modded something into a game, you wouldn't be able to receive a patent for it, and anyone could come around that was a quote-unquote real company, add it to their brand new game, and basically accept it as their own novel and unique invention. That is not how patents work, and I don't know what Nintendo is trying to do here, outside of just basically trying to kill one of the three tenets of Pocketpair's defense. And that means that Nintendo definitely is nervous about losing this case, because they're trying to get this entire argument thrown out of court. And that in and of itself makes absolutely no sense and seems completely unfair, like Nintendo's trying to stack this court case against Pocketpair and make sure that they can win even if it doesn't have any logical reason to do so. Just imagine a world in which every single modification to a game would basically be free for anyone to come around, add it to their own original game, and then apply for a patent to it. And in previous videos, I've shown multiple examples of different games that are using the same mechanics that Nintendo is trying to say they've patented, like actually putting Pokemon in Grand Theft Auto 5 here. Now, this is not an example that Pocketpair used in their defense, but it's a great example to show how somebody can do something before the patent holder actually obtains that patent, because this would be a perfect example of prior art, a modification to a game actually completing all of the mechanics that Nintendo is saying they invented. And that's why prior art is such a great defense, because you can basically show an example to a judge and say, they didn't invent it, it already existed, therefore that patent should be invalidated. And if a judge in Japan invalidated that patent, then the entire court case against Pocketpair and Palworld is gone and Nintendo is back to basically square one. And it all stems just by throwing a ball into an arena, and that's why all these prior art defenses are so strong as far as Pocketpair's case is concerned. Nintendo's trying to say that throwing this ball into the playfield and affecting the world around it is something that they invented and patented. And in a previous video, again, I went over what the prior art defense was. But the big thing in this actual case right now that Nintendo is filing is about Pocket Souls. It is a Dark Souls modification that basically brings the world of something like a Pokeball into the actual gameplay. You can capture opponents and then you can use them to fight for you in a certain set criteria and a certain order. That is what Nintendo is saying they invented with Pokemon, and that's what they're saying they are patenting here. And they are trying to get the entire argument of this being prior art thrown out of court because they are saying modifications just do not count as actual prior art. It is the moral equivalent of saying if you took a canvas that already had a painting on it and then painted over it with a brand new painting, that somehow because that painting exists on top of another thing, it would not be new, novel, or unique because it's working on an underlying structure. I have never once heard that argument ever in a patent case, in a copyright case or otherwise, and it seems like Nintendo's basically just trying to make things up as they go along to try to make sure they win a lawsuit that doesn't really seem like they should win on the merits of the case. And that's something that Nintendo just seems to be doing all the time. They change the rules whenever it suits them, especially if they seem to be behind, especially in a lawsuit, because that in and of itself is absolutely insane. I don't know how you can argue that mods are not prior art. Think of all the different game engines out there that people build things on. The engine is the underlying structure, so wouldn't any content you put into it be a quote-unquote mod? Or if somebody takes a game and makes a brand new feature out of it, would that not be considered novel, new, and unique? Nintendo's argument here makes absolutely no sense, and you can tell they are nervous that they're going to lose this case. And that is why in the most recent court filing you get a direct mention of Pocket Souls, because every single thing that the Pocket Souls modification of Dark Souls does is basically exactly what Nintendo has a patent for, down to the order of operation and how it works within the game. So that's why Nintendo is trying to say that a modification to a game should not count as prior art. This is basically like watching two children play in the backyard, and one kid's upset that they lose. They basically say "nuh-uh" and try to change the rules in the middle of the game to make sure that they can win. That is no different than what Nintendo is doing right here, because they know if a judge considers something like Pocket Souls prior art, then that patent is going to get absolutely invalidated because it never should have been granted to Nintendo in the first place. Patents are basically the first person that creates it should be able to get the patent, and nobody can patent it after that if a prior art example can be given. And again, we're still talking about some of the most simplistic gameplay elements in a game, throwing a ball into a play space and affecting the world around you. And I always have fun asking in the comments what game you think of, because there's hundreds upon hundreds of games out there that would satisfy this exact same thing. But as you look at this Pocket Souls gameplay right here, you can see they are throwing an object into the ring, they are capturing their opponents, and they're using them later to help fight in the game. That's exactly what Pokemon does. That's exactly what Nintendo's talking about on that patent, but in its actual entirety, you will see it appear in a modification of Dark Souls first. So think of a world in which every single mod, again, just was something that any company could come around and take. That would be absolutely insane. It would stifle creativity in the gaming space, because so many games get their life started as mods, and those people go on to make their own games. So what Nintendo is doing here is they're just asking a judge to completely disregard the prior art examples for all of these modifications, because they work on an underlying game in and of itself. That would be kind of the philosophical argument to say that this shot right here that I would receive a copyright for because it's off my camera and I hit record and framed it doesn't actually belong to me, because the underlying structure of how I was able to actually obtain this shot would be using a camera from Blackmagic, where they actually created the hardware and the software for me to obtain the image. Or sticking with Blackmagic, because I used DaVinci Resolve to edit this video, it wouldn't actually be a creative use, because the underlying software underneath the video would be DaVinci Resolve. That is the same argument that Nintendo is making here for a patent, saying because that mod exists in a game, and then it should not count as prior art whatsoever. And again, that's just something that I've absolutely never heard before, and I don't think should hold up in a court case whatsoever. And it's really interesting. Nintendo's kind of playing around in the world of Minecraft now. It really seems to be rules for thee, but not for me. Nintendo can do in their minds whatever they want, because they're Nintendo, and anytime they do anything, it must be new and innovative. But the reality is, Nintendo definitely has copied things in the past from other games, and that's kind of how this entire industry works. A lot of inspiration comes from things you've played before, and if you take gaming as a whole, it is such a jumbled mess as to where inspirations come from and where things got started. And the reality of the situation is, all of this intermingling of ideas benefits not only the business of gaming, allowing developers to make things and have some inspiration here and there, but it also ends up benefiting the players, because they get fun things that they know, love, and remember across all different games, across all different genres, across all different platforms. This is the equivalent of trying to say on the Nintendo side of things, you can't make a horror movie with a masked villain who is going to stab people with a knife because it's already been done. It is so vague, it is so common as to say, how could anyone patent that idea whatsoever? But that's exactly what Nintendo is trying to do here. They are stating in their opinion, and they want a judge to agree with this, that because these prior art examples are modifications to existing games, they preserve no protection whatsoever. They are not examples of prior art, and Pocketpair should not be able to use them in a court case. You know what that's called? That is called stacking the deck. It's called changing the rules. It's basically trying to just make sure that Nintendo doesn't lose, even though it seems like that's exactly what's going to happen. Because if you've never played Pocket Souls before, a mod, not only is it fun, but it basically is 100% unequivocal proof that Nintendo did not create anything new when they obtained that patent. That means that patent that they're using to sue Pocketpair for would be invalidated, and it would mean that Nintendo's entire lawsuit against them would go up in smoke, just like you saw that monster go up in smoke a moment ago. And that is why Nintendo is so determined and trying trying to get modifications, at least in Japan, not recognized as prior art, because if they can pull it off, then Pocketpair loses a lot of their defense, and if they can't pull it off, Pocketpair basically is going to get a big win against Nintendo, and they know they do not want that. But honestly, Nintendo continually does ridiculous things, but this just seems capricious and unfair. They are trying to change the rules in the middle of the game again to make sure that the win conditions for them become much more favorable, and Pocketpair loses an entire defense. We're basically being arrested for a crime and the judge telling you, well, you can't actually defend yourself because the prosecution has said your defense should not be allowed. But we're done. I'll see you guys next time. If you have any questions, leave them down below, but we'll see what happens next. Bye-bye.